Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame, has shed light on how Western countries are partly responsible for the recent spate of coups on the continent, as well as those that have occurred in the past. Kagame said that although coup d'états were not ideal, there was a genuine need to analyze the underlying factors driving them. He also said that coups in Africa don't happen on their own, but have linkages to the West. Kagame gave an example that through neocolonialism, Western countries exercise an inordinate amount of control over African countries and are constantly dictating what our leaders should do and not do. The Rwandan president highlighted that when things go south, these Western powers simply jump ship and point fingers at African leaders for doing the very things they instructed them to do and not do, which backfired. He made these comments at the just-ended summit of the Free Basins held in Brazzaville, Congo from October 26 to October 28, 2023.
When we talk about coups, coup d'etats are a very bad thing. There's no question about it. But people need to go beyond just hearing coup d'etats and look at what is the possible origin of these coups. And coups also presupposes that these are just military people taking over power from constitutional or civilian governments. But you have to understand also that there are some very bad civilian governments too. So that's one thing leads to another, and therefore in analyzing that, you want to see what is the cause of this bad thing that has happened, and then fix that. So when you look at governance generally, you want to look at which place that is able to look at or look after its own people, make the very investments we are talking about so that people and countries can thrive. This bad governance and coups are not confined to Africa. In fact, they have association with the interaction of the rest of the world, particularly those countries that, as of origin, as we know, who were either the colonizers or, and even after colonial times, actually the sort of relationship between those who were colonized with the colonizers stayed in a different form and stayed affecting the people of the continent. One example is the incredible amount of control those people still exercise in the continent. You find those coups or bad governance happening on the watch of the very people who colonize those countries and still working with them as if nothing is happening. When things go wrong, of course, you are right to blame the Africans. I think for me, I would blame them for having allowed it in the first place. Having allowed that people from outside should come to any country, to Africa, and start telling people what to do, what not to do, and when things go wrong, they just jump the ship and they start blaming the very people they told to do what they did and later on backfired.
President Kagame's comments shed light on a fundamental truth. The Western country's historical and ongoing interference in African affairs plays a significant role in fueling the coups that have plagued the continent. The control exerted through neocolonialism and the constant dictation of African leaders' actions create a volatile environment where Western powers are quick to distance themselves when things go wrong, shifting the blame onto African leaders. This blame game only exacerbates the problem, as it undermines the agency of African nations and their right to self-determination. Coups in Africa are, in part, a manifestation of the frustration and desire of the masses to reclaim control from Western influence. This can be observed in cases like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, where long-standing French influence has fueled popular discontent and contributed to the desire for change. To reduce the prevalence of coups in Africa, it is crucial for the West to stop meddling in African affairs and respect the autonomy and self-determination of African nations. Allowing African countries to govern themselves according to their own needs and aspirations will lead to greater stability and prosperity on the continent. While the causes of coups are multifaceted, diminishing Western interference is a critical step toward addressing this issue and supporting Africa's journey toward self-sufficiency and democratic governance. Do you agree with Paul Kagame's explanation of how the West is responsible for coups in Africa?